G'day guys, welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome, and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget the bell so you never miss a new video. Let's begin. Our first story this week is a continuation from last week. If you've not seen last week's video, the link is in the description below. I suggest you watch it first for context. Last week, our poster told us of the story of how they were attacked by a strange shadowy figure in the church where they were working. This week, we'll find out what happened after they returned to school. I had a lot of questions and requests for more of my experiences after I shared my first encounter. It's entitled Paranormal Encounter in a Church, if you haven't read it. I wanted to share the next experience I had with the entity from the church. This part of things is fairly condensed, as listing every single thing that happened would be too long to read. Without further ado, here is the aftermath of my encounter. It wasn't long after the events at the church, and things had begun to seem normal for me again. I went back to college that fall and had a pretty good semester. That spring, however, things started downhill for my family and I. My father was diagnosed with cancer, and there wasn't a whole lot we could do about it. I felt absolutely powerless. I remember commuting back and forth between school, I had a dorm room on campus, home, and the hospital where I'd drive my dad to get his treatments. It wasn't a good point for me in life. The weight of my dad's illness weighed heavily on me, and I ended a long-term relationship with my fiancée on very bad terms. I slept a lot during that time and suffered from severe depression. I ended up gaining about 40 pounds of weight from stress eating, drinking, and lack of physical activity from moping around for months. The first case I remember was when I was home for the weekend, and I went to my room to crash for a while. I was watching a movie, and the lights were on in the room, when I felt that all too familiar feeling in my head. I slumped over and passed out. As I drifted, I remember hearing a faint tap 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 at the window in my room. I had the dream about the banquet again, only this time when I turned to run, the chairs and everything on the table were blown over by a mighty force as the shadowy figure, this time visible, but only as a dark mass vaguely shaped like a man, moved violently to corner me. He had me cornered in the dream, but as usual, I woke up. When I woke up, the room was dark, and the sound of static from my TV was blaring. But when I shifted my eyes up, I saw the figure standing over my bed. That's when I realized the lights were still on, but like before, the figure was sucking the light out of the room. I passed out again, only to wake up to my dad telling me, "Good night." For the next few weeks, I'd periodically wake up, hearing knocking at my windows. It always came in threes, and normally happened between 2 and 3 a.m. My dogs in the backyard would also go ballistic about that time. I later did some research on sleep paralysis and talked to my doctor about it, leaving out the part about being chased at the church, of course. He told me that it was fairly common, and that it was basically just me waking up while still in the REM part of sleep, and not to fight it. Feeling a bit better, I went back to the school. It was close to spring break when we got the good news that my dad was going to be okay. We were overjoyed. Later in 2014, the cancer came back, and sadly my father passed away in early 2015. I'm still thankful for the years we got with him between though. At the time, I really felt like things were getting better though. With my dad's illness no longer weighing my mind down, I felt like I was ready to get back to normal. I wasn't 100%, but things were starting to look up for me again. Around spring break, my plans got cancelled, but it was a huge deal to me. I was the sound technician for the college's band, and they had scheduled a 5-day event over the course of what was supposed to be our spring break. I was bummed to give up my entire break, but I was the lead sound guy, and didn't really have much choice as my scholarship required that I attend all of the events. We got back late Friday evening, and the dorms were pretty much empty. My college charged students to stay over the break, and the fee was pretty heavy, so most people either left or rented a cheap hotel. We got special permission to come back early at no charge. None of the other band members were in my particular dorm. My wing of the dorm was empty, except for me. I climbed into my bunk to go to sleep. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure I suffered a sleep paralysis episode while I was out. It happened very quickly. I woke up from a really bad dream to the sound of my door opening. Our doors were old and made an audible click when you opened them. I heard that, followed by the hinges creaking loudly. I assumed it was my roommate, TJ, coming back. But then I remembered that TJ was supposed to be in Florida until that next Tuesday. My eyes shot open to see the door slowly sway, and a dark hand slide through and push the door open. I lay there paralyzed as a large, dark figure entered my room, the light coming from the outside window vaguely illuminating it. When I say large, I mean whatever this was, it must have been close to 8-9 feet tall. As it entered the doorway, it had to duck to get in. The thing was darkness personified. Think of what it's like to look into a dark cavern when you're standing in the light. That sort of impenetrable darkness that swallows the light around it. It was darkness in the shape of a man. I couldn't make out any facial features. Its face was a shadow, as was the rest of it. The light from the hallway seemed to fade into shadow behind it. It stayed in the hallway at first, and began to approach me slowly. Its movements seemed human, but also unnatural. The movements were graceful, but reminded me of a spider. Its movements were unnatural. I blinked for a second, and when my eyes opened, it was standing over my bed, hovering over me. I was in the top bunk, and it still towered over me, nearly reaching the ceiling. It stretched out its arms, and they seemed to go on forever, making a perverse cross. It reminded me of a snake ready to constrict a helpless mouse. That's when I realized something. Unlike the other times I'd woken up, I could move. I wasn't suffering sleep paralysis, I was just scared. When that realization hit me, I rolled slightly, raised my left fist, and punched as hard as I could. The thing caught my fist within its hand. I felt an icy grip, followed by a freezing sensation, sort of like when a limb gets numbed from the cold. The freezing, numbing sensation went all the way back to my shoulder, and my entire arm fell down, completely limp. Once again, I was at its mercy. The last thing I remember was the thing moving its hand again, this time over my head. Its hand wrapped around my head and pushed me back to the position I was laying in before. Then it lightly touched my forehead with its pointer finger, and I felt that same sensation I felt the very first time I had the sleep paralysis, like your head is going numb, and I passed out. The next morning, I woke up to the sunlight from the window illuminating my room. My entire body was sore, like I had been beaten up. The door was open to an empty hallway, the front door still completely locked, and most frighteningly of all, the sheets tucked in tight around me. That was the last time I ever saw that thing. Why it chose then to leave me alone is beyond me. I wish there was a more climactic or exciting end to this story, but there's just not. Something strange and unexplainable happened to me. I've looked for answers, but honestly, found nothing concrete. I've spoken to a few people who seem to think it was a demon that latched onto me because of my negativity, but I have no way of knowing that was what it was. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I've seen some other very strange things, but honestly, I don't feel like any of them are as frightening or interesting as this. Edit. Adding flair, I'm not very good at Reddit. Posted by user OldB37. I had a few people last week suggest it was a skinwalker or a wendigo, but I'm more inclined to agree with the poster in that it sounds more like a demon than anything else. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. G'day guys, Andy here. I hope you enjoyed this week's journey into the world of the creepy and unusual things that people experience in our world. If you did, give it a thumbs up, that really helps me out heaps, and lets me know what sort of stories you guys like to hear. Also, let me know in the comments below if you prefer these single long stories or the few shorter ones. We'll do this all again next week. Until then, good night.